Preparing for a product management at Wells Fargo interview? You've reached Candy Mentor, and this video is for you. We'll walk through 20 key questions you're likely to face. For each question you'll see a sample answer followed by the key points to cover. Subscribe, like, and share, and drop a topic request in the comments. Question 1. Why do you want to be a product manager at Wells Fargo? I am interested in Wells Fargo because banking products affect customers' everyday financial decisions, so product quality and trust matter enormously. I would bring customer discovery, analytical prioritization, and strong stakeholder management to improve digital experiences while respecting security, privacy, and regulatory requirements. Wells Fargo's scale also creates meaningful opportunities to simplify complex journeys, such as account opening, payments, and lending. I want to build products that are convenient, transparent, inclusive, and demonstrably valuable for customers and the business. While answering, connect your motivation to financial services, customer trust, responsible innovation, Wells Fargo's digital transformation, cross-functional leadership, and the opportunity to improve experiences for diverse banking customers. Question 2. How would you prioritize features for a Wells Fargo mobile banking app? I would first separate mandatory work, such as security, regulatory, and reliability commitments, from discretionary features. For the rest, I would score opportunities using customer reach, pain severity, business value, confidence, and implementation effort. I would validate assumptions through behavioral data, interviews, usability testing, and operational feedback. A mobile deposit improvement might outrank a cosmetic redesign because it affects more customers and reduces friction. I would publish the rationale, review dependencies, and measure outcomes after launch. Make sure to cover customer impact, risk reduction, regulatory obligations, revenue, effort, strategic alignment, accessibility, data quality, and a transparent framework such as RICE or weighted scoring. Question 3. Describe how you would define success for a new digital banking feature. I would define success as a customer and business outcome, not simply feature usage. For example, for a bill pay redesign, the objective could be increasing successful first-time payments while reducing support contacts. Primary metrics might include completion rate, time to complete, repeat usage, and payment failure rate. Guardrails would include fraud incidents, complaints, accessibility defects, and system reliability. I would establish a baseline, segment results by customer type, test incrementally, and inspect both quantitative and qualitative feedback. In your answer, discuss a measurable objective, leading and lagging indicators, adoption, task completion, customer satisfaction, risk metrics, guardrails, segmentation, baseline comparisons, and post-launch review cadence. Question 4. How would you improve the customer experience for opening a checking account online? I would map the journey from initial interest through funded account, then analyze abandonment by step, device, customer segment, and verification outcome. I would interview applicants and review call center reasons to identify confusing questions, document requirements, or unclear status messages. Improvements could include progressive disclosure, saved progress, plain language explanations, accessible design, and proactive updates. I would not remove necessary controls, instead, I would reduce avoidable friction around them. Success would combine completion, funding, complaints, fraud, and compliance outcomes. Be sure to mention journey mapping, abandonment analysis, identity verification, compliance requirements, progressive disclosure, accessibility, experimentation, fraud prevention, and clear communication about application status. Question 5. Tell me about a time you resolved conflict between engineering, design, and business stakeholders. In one project, engineering favored a reliable phased release, while sales wanted a broad launch tied to a customer commitment. I brought both groups together around a shared goal, delivering customer value without creating operational risk. We documented must-have capabilities, dependencies, and measurable launch criteria. I proposed releasing the smallest viable workflow to a controlled segment, followed by a second phase. That compromise preserved the commercial deadline, gave engineering manageable scope, and created evidence for the next investment decision. Focus on listening, shared objectives, evidence-based trade-offs, decision ownership, explicit constraints, escalation judgment, written alignment, and how you preserved relationships while reaching an actionable decision. Question 6. How would you balance customer convenience with fraud prevention in a banking product? I would treat fraud prevention as a risk-based experience rather than applying identical friction to every customer. Low-risk activity could remain seamless, while unusual device, location, velocity, or transaction patterns trigger step-up verification. I would monitor fraud loss, false positive declines, successful completion, abandonment, complaints, and recovery time. Any model or rule should be explainable, privacy-conscious, and reviewed with security, compliance, and operations. The goal is not maximum friction, it is reducing material risk while preserving legitimate customer access. Cover risk-based authentication, false positives, customer friction, transaction monitoring, behavioral signals, step-up verification, privacy, explainability, fraud losses, and collaboration with security, compliance, and operations. Question 7. How would you use customer research to guide a Wells Fargo product decision? I would begin with a decision and specific research questions, rather than conducting research without a purpose. For a low adoption problem, I might combine funnel analytics with interviews, diary studies, and moderated usability sessions across relevant customer segments. I would distinguish stated preferences from observed behavior and look for patterns rather than isolated anecdotes. After synthesis, I would translate findings into opportunity statements, rank them by impact and confidence, and test the strongest hypotheses through prototypes or controlled experiments. Mention research objectives, representative sampling, interviews, usability testing, surveys, behavioral analytics, bias control, synthesis, triangulation, and converting findings into prioritized product hypotheses. Question 8. What would you do if a product metric improved but customer complaints increased? I would not declare success based on the improving metric alone. First, I would verify instrumentation and examine complaints by journey step, cohort, channel, accessibility need, and customer impact. The feature may be increasing completion while creating confusion for a smaller but important group. I would review recordings, support transcripts, and operational data, then identify whether the issue requires content, workflow, training, or rollback changes. I would share the full picture with stakeholders and adjust the scorecard to include customer harm indicators. In your answer, discuss metric definition, segmentation, qualitative investigation, unintended consequences, guardrail metrics, complaint taxonomy, cohort analysis, rollback criteria, and communicating uncertainty to stakeholders. Question 9. How would you create a product roadmap for a banking platform? I would build the roadmap around customer and business outcomes, not a list of requested features. I would start with the product vision, strategic priorities, regulatory obligations, reliability needs, and validated customer problems. Then I would map dependencies, technical enablers, capacity, and sequencing across teams. Each initiative would include a measurable outcome, assumptions, risks, and an approximate horizon rather than false precision. I would maintain near-term commitment while keeping later work adaptable as evidence, regulations, and priorities change. Be sure to cover product vision, customer problems, business strategy, regulatory commitments, platform dependencies, sequencing, capacity, measurable outcomes, scenario planning, and regular roadmap communication. Question 10. How would you launch a new financial product while meeting regulatory and compliance requirements? I would involve legal, compliance, risk, privacy, security, and operations during discovery, not at the final approval stage. Together, we would define eligible customers, disclosures, consent requirements, prohibited practices, control objectives, and evidence needed for approval. Product and engineering would build those requirements into the workflow and test edge cases before launch. I would use a limited rollout with clear gates, monitoring, support readiness, and rollback procedures. Responsible innovation means making compliance part of the product design, not treating it as paperwork. Discuss early compliance partnership, customer eligibility, disclosures, fair lending, privacy, controls, documentation, testing, approvals, monitoring, operational readiness, and launch gates. Question 11. How would you evaluate whether to build, buy, or partner for a new banking capability? I would compare build, buy, and partner options against strategic importance, customer differentiation, delivery speed, total cost, control requirements, and operational risk. A commodity capability may be better purchased if the vendor meets security, resilience, privacy, and regulatory standards. A core differentiating workflow may justify building because control and adaptability matter more. I would assess integration effort, data ownership, service level commitments, exit costs, and concentration risk. The decision would include a weighted business case, technical review, and clearly documented assumptions. Focus on strategic differentiation, customer value, time to market, total cost, integration complexity, security, resilience, data ownership, regulatory risk, vendor concentration, and long-term flexibility. Question 12. Describe a product experiment you would run for a banking experience. For a credit card application flow, I might test whether clearer progress information increases completed applications without increasing abandonment later. Eligible traffic would be randomly assigned to the current experience or the redesigned version, with the same underlying approval rules. The primary metric would be completed applications. Guardrails would include approval quality, disclosures viewed, complaints, accessibility, and fraud signals. I would predefine the analysis window and decision thresholds. If results differ by segment, I would investigate before generalizing or scaling the change. Mention a falsifiable hypothesis, target population, control group, randomization, primary metric, guardrails, sample size, duration, ethical considerations, and interpretation beyond statistical significance. Question 13. How would you use data to identify an opportunity for Wells Fargo customers? I would begin by studying a customer journey, such as digital bill payment, across acquisition, activation, completion, and repeat use. Funnel and cohort analysis could reveal where customers struggle, while segmentation might show a disproportionate issue for new users or specific devices. I would validate the pattern with interviews, support contacts, and usability tests because correlation alone does not explain the cause. Then I would estimate affected customers and value, formulate a hypothesis, and test an intervention with appropriate privacy controls. Cover funnel analysis, cohorting, segmentation, anomaly detection, qualitative validation, causal caution, privacy, opportunity sizing, business impact, and turning an observed pattern into a testable hypothesis. Question 14. What would you do if engineering estimated that your highest priority feature would take 6 months? I would first confirm the customer outcome and understand what drives the estimate: architecture, integrations, controls, data, or capacity. Then I would work with engineering and design to separate essential value from optional scope and identify a thin vertical slice. We might launch a manual or limited segment workflow while building the scalable solution, provided risk and customer expectations are controlled. I would present stakeholders with options, cost, timing, and trade-offs rather than pressuring the team into an unrealistic commitment. In your answer, address outcome clarification, scope decomposition, technical discovery, MVP design, alternatives, sequencing, dependencies, risk, customer validation, and honest communication about trade-offs. Question 15. How would you design an inclusive product experience for customers with different abilities and financial circumstances? I would include customers with different abilities, languages, devices, connectivity, and financial circumstances throughout research and testing. The experience should support keyboard navigation, screen readers, sufficient contrast, scalable text, plain language, and resilient performance on slower connections. I would avoid assumptions that every customer has the same digital confidence or access to documentation. Alongside overall conversion, I would monitor completion, errors, support needs, and satisfaction by relevant segments. Inclusive design improves usability broadly while helping identify unintended barriers before launch. Be sure to mention accessibility standards, assistive technology, language, digital literacy, low bandwidth scenarios, equitable research, plain language, alternative channels, and measuring disparate outcomes. Question 16. How would you manage a critical production incident affecting digital banking customers? During an incident, my priorities would be customer safety, accurate information, rapid containment, and coordinated decision-making. I would join the incident command structure, clarify severity and affected journeys, support rollback or traffic controls, and ensure customer service teams receive consistent guidance. If transactions or access were at risk, I would involve risk, legal, and regulatory partners promptly. After restoration, I would lead a blameless review covering root cause, detection gaps, communication, and durable fixes, then track those actions to completion. Discuss customer safety, incident command, severity assessment, communication, containment, rollback, support coordination, regulatory escalation, root cause analysis, and prevention through measurable corrective actions. Question 17. How would you improve a product with low customer adoption despite strong initial interest? Strong interest followed by weak adoption usually indicates a gap between promise and delivered value, onboarding friction, or insufficient trust. I would examine the funnel from awareness through first successful outcome, segmenting by channel and customer type. Interviews and usability tests would reveal whether customers understand the feature and feel comfortable using it. I would improve the earliest valuable action, clarify benefits and expectations, and test contextual education or reminders. I would measure activation and retained value, not merely clicks or registrations. Focus on the complete funnel, activation definition, onboarding friction, value proposition, discoverability, trust concerns, segment differences, qualitative research, lifecycle communication, and experimentation. Question 18. How do you communicate product decisions to senior executives and frontline teams? For executives, I would present the customer problem, strategic value, recommendation, economics, risks, alternatives, and decision required in a concise narrative. For frontline teams, I would explain what changes, why it matters, how customers are affected, and where to escalate issues. I would support both audiences with written documentation, success metrics, owners, and timelines. Communication should be consistent but not identical. I would invite questions, capture unresolved concerns, and revisit the decision when new evidence materially changes the assumptions. Mention audience-specific communication, concise decision narratives, customer evidence, business impact, risks, alternatives, metrics, ownership, written artifacts, and feedback loops for two-way alignment. Question 19. Tell me about a product failure and what you learned from it. I once launched a workflow that met the documented requirements but required too much explanation for first-time users. Adoption was below forecast, and support contacts increased. I took responsibility, reviewed session behavior and support conversations, and learned that we had optimized internal completeness rather than customer comprehension. We simplified the flow, added contextual guidance, and tested it with representative users before relaunching. The experience taught me to validate the end-to-end journey earlier and treat support data as product feedback, not merely an operational issue. Be honest about context, customer impact, decision rationale, missed signals, accountability, recovery actions, measurable learning, and how the experience changed your product process. Question 20. How would you define and communicate the product strategy for a Wells Fargo digital payments experience? I would define the strategy around making everyday payments simple, predictable, and trusted for target customer segments. I would identify unmet needs through journey research and data, then position the experience around reliability, transparency, strong controls, and useful financial context rather than feature volume. The strategy would connect customer problems to capabilities such as alerts, dispute handling, fraud protection, and resilient processing. I would sequence investments by impact and dependency, communicate explicit trade-offs, and measure successful payments, retention, trust, and risk outcomes. Cover target customers, unmet needs, strategic positioning, trust and security, competitive differentiation, capabilities, sequencing, measurable outcomes, regulatory constraints, and alignment across business and technology teams. If you are still with us, congratulations! You are much ahead of the rest and serious about preparing for your interview. We hope we were able to add value to your preparation and create some helpful content. Do not forget to like and share this video. Your small act can do great things for us.